Welcome to the 35th episode of Speaking of Poetry. I am Rennie McQuilkin, your host, and today the featured guest on a show which features a presentation I gave at Hillstead Museum in the Sunken Garden on the occasion of my installation as the 5th Poet Laureate of Connecticut. Installation I thought was an interesting term. I felt a bit like a light bulb being installed, but then since as Poet Laureate I am here to illuminate the joy of poetry, perhaps the term was well chosen. I am being filmed at the grounds of the old 18th century farmhouse where my wife and I live. In the background you will see the 19th century barn with its wonderful cupola. And so on we go. I hope you enjoy the show. Oh my goodness. So many people, and there's David Budries in the back producing sound, and so many people in my immediate family and in my poetic family. And I was just saying that I really don't need to do anything because they're all doing it. There's so many people doing things for poetry in the state that I just get the big bucks and sit back and turn it over to them. And this is my second home, so thanks to everybody at Hillstead Museum, and of course to the people in the State Department. I'm going to see if I can say this, of Economic and Community Development. Yes, well done. I got it. In the Office of the Arts, and of course the Board of Governors here, and Susan Ballack, and all my friends here, and Lisa Lappy, who runs the Sunken Garden Festival. And if I go on any farther, I'll be saying their names all night because there are so many wonderful people here. Thank you for coming. And now pardon me if I read, because otherwise I'll bumble all over the place. But I am blessed to be here tonight, and deeply honored to be presented with an opportunity to help, and help is the word that keeps running through this, further the cause of poetry in Connecticut. It has been my dream ever since I became involved in the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival, and then sort of that segued into becoming a publisher, and that's really been what I've been doing happily, and as a teacher too, promoting the cause of poetry, which needs a little promoting, even with all the great people doing so much for it. The word poetry instills in the hearts of many of us a kind of fear that is difficult to fathom. And I think, we all grow up loving it. Today, we were sitting around this morning, and my second mother, Martha Weisberger, was saying poems from Winnie the Pooh, Winnie Ili Pooe, Descendant Scholars, Tump, Tump, Tump. And we grow up hearing poems and loving them, and then we we have teachers in the first through the 6th grade, but then something happens in 7th grade, and I don't know what it is. And we're taught that poetry can only be understood by a fearful acquaintance with Jurassian concepts such as synecdoche, dactylic, and here's the best one, amphibrachian. They have big beaks. And then there are those New Yorker poems that no one but John Ashbery and Helen Bender, I'll get sued, can understand. So my mission will be to help undo public PT, which is poetic trepidation, and find ways of suggesting that poetry, like bread, is for everyone, as Curbstone and Sandy Taylor, rest in peace, used to say. That it is a delight to the ear, a joy to the heart, a feast for the mind, and a solace for the spirit. And all of you here already know that. You've been feasting on poetry in this garden, this paradise for poetry, and many another paradise in this greater region, from here to Mystic to all over the state. But Galway Canal called this particular place, this garden, a paradise for poetry. Of course, like Galway, playing on the word paradise, which literally means walled garden. And that it is. I would like to help, there's the word again, others spread the word that This is my favorite quote. I say it too much. Although it is difficult to get the news from poetry, people die every day miserably for lack of what is found there. William Carlos Williams. So I would like to help people die less miserably. Oh dear, got doctors here. The way in which poetry can become a vital force, we all know from after 9/11 when everybody turned to poetry, and it gave us the courage to get through that difficult time. And I had an experience with several poets who are here in the audience tonight. The other night, reading at the Windsor Library for International Peace Day, and it seemed that somehow we turn to poetry whenever the matters of great import arise. And I'd like to read one of the poems I wrote for that occasion. It's based on a photograph, and all of you have seen it by now, and it's going to do more good for world peace than probably any words I can say, or even than any poems a poet can write, because photography, of course, speaks louder than many words. But one tries to write words that capture the essence of photography, and perhaps go one step farther by putting in smell and taste and sound. And we have an advantage over photographers because we can use all the senses. But that picture of a little boy washed up on the beach I think in Turkey. There's several pictures. One of a policeman carrying him up from the shore, but another of him, and the one that is all over the world now, looking very much as if he's in the womb still. His family had died in that futile attempt that many are facing of finding a safe haven from war, whether it be in Syria or elsewhere. So this is called Child of War, and pardon it, it's very raw. Pardon me for reading it, but this is what I read the other night, and I think it's an example of how we poets try to tap into world events. Shelley said that the poet is the unacknowledged legislator of the world, but I think given the trump cards that are being played these days, we don't much want to be legislators. And for that matter, I think that poets really don't legislate. When given a podium, has to throw in much politics. Sorry for any Republicans sitting out there. I doubt there are any. Anyway, so this is called Child of War. They are fleeing, they are fleeing, they are fleeing the stench of war, the empty space where their homes once stood. They are fleeing with empty hearts in boats too small for the sea of grief. They are drowning, they are drowning. Here is one come ashore at the edge of the surf. He is 3, he is tucked in, knees folded, hands together, afloat in the womb. He will not wake. He is at peace, the only peace we seem to know how to make. And that it feels good, to get it out. I've suddenly, when I have no time to write, find myself getting up early in the morning and writing for 2 hours and saying, bye everybody, I'm sorry, I'm doing this. So I'm going to read a few more poems. Here's a poem about the way childhood should be for all children in all lands, and it makes reference to the milkman, and I think some of you here are of an age that you remember the milkman coming with his rattle of bottles, the new ones, and picking up the old ones, and if you didn't get down there in time, it was freezing, then the cream would rise up and push the cap up, and then there is the cap with the little tab, and anyway, I'll read the poem. It's called Morning. Lying alone in the straight and narrow bed of old age, I work my way down the crooked hall of memory to where it was I went those early mornings, trailing behind me the tattered cloud bank of my blanket. To the room Father had not yet expelled me from, the room with the queen-size bed and rose-red comforter. I slid under, as close to Mother as possible, molding myself to the seed curl of her back and shoulder, the sweet tang of her, slowing my breathing to match her own with long, delicious inspirations, until first light lit the cream of her neck and cheek, and day broke in with the rustle of pheasants in the pine, phoebeing of chickadees, phew-phew-phewing of cardinals, swish of washing and brushing from the street cleaning truck, and finally the high-pitched bell sound of bottles placed in their metal basket by the Nakoma dairyman, and father would groan and mother would turn to hold me against the soft of her, and beyond the veil of her hair the light would grow, and she would take me by the hand along the dark, crooked hall to the back stairs, down to the brightening kitchen, and let me bring in the milk. I'd uncrinkle the stiff paper cap of a narrow-necked bottle, lift the tongue on the tab beneath, pull it from the mouth, love the liquid labor and pop of its release, and lick the cream from its underside, the thick, sweet cream, a memory I knew, but not of what. So there are times when that happens. There are times, childhood is a very difficult time for the young. Well, I was teaching down the hill from here at Miss Porter's. Kelly McCarthy was one of my students, a wonderful student. She was an epileptic, and we had been taught what to do should she have a seizure in class. Gary knows. But I wasn't really totally ready when she did. She was to read a poem. Ironically enough, it was Out by Robert Frost, but that's just too terrible to put into the poem. And she had the book in her hand for safekeeping. And I asked her that night after this all happened, which brought that class together in a most remarkable way. All of the class members and she who survived this, it was a petit mal seizure, came together in a way I've never had a class come together quite. They'd been through something together. They all went off to early lunch and came back, and we met and talked about it. So it's called We All Fall Down for Kelly, my student. Her turn had come. She knew by heart, almost, the lines she was to speak, but gave us, God help her, the truth beyond the lines, beyond the book she dropped, its pages thrashing to the floor like broken wings. The truth she beat her head upon, bit into so hard I could not pry her jaws, teeth grinding. The truth beyond us she saw, as ever, her risen eyes gone white as bone. I did what I could. I held her, seized with sudden love and knowing we all fall down. In the end, I carried her curled in my arms across one threshold and another. I didn't have any idea how to end that poem. I was just so worked up, and there were a lot of violins playing, and it was getting longer and longer at the end. I decided to go out and just run and just said, could you? And I just said to myself, could you try to say that simply, please? The fewer words, the better. And then some students explained to me what I had meant. That I had crossed one threshold and another. It just seemed like a good word for going out of the English building and down the hill into the infirmary. But something's going on there, maybe during the dreams or undercovers or whatever. Sister Marie Angelica plays badminton with Sister Marie Modeste most afternoons. Today, because of lengthy vespers, they are late. A pale moon has already risen, and early bats are darting like black shuttlecocks. Except for the whisper of wings and the sisters' hushed encouragement, the only sounds are the plinking of rackets and a monotone of mourning doves. On all sides of the court, the sculpted yew in cubes and columns might pass for black, so deeply green it grows. And now it moves closer, Marie Angelica would say. who has been known to have visions. Though she moves as aptly as the bats, doesn't miss a shot, when she fades for a long one from Marie Modeste, sways on her toes, arches her back, raises one arm and the other to keep her difficult balance. She is lost, a long-legged girl again in mare's tail, mullein, milkweed, leaning on the sudden sky as if it can sustain her, like a hand in the small of her back it does. Her nerve ends quick as a shiver of poplar, arms like branches in a wind. She feels a cry begin to rise, to force the self before it, and burst, all colors one, that white. It vaults straight up, a feathered cry that hovers in the heart of heaven, hovers and plummets to the gut of the racket she sights it in, the perfect bird, the shuttlecock Marie Angelica keeps in play, will not let fall, despite the darkness gathering. And when it appeared in a book, and there was an illustration. I told them not to illustrate, but there was an illustration, very badly done. But the interesting thing was that despite the very bad illustration, Sister Marie Modeste on the other side of the net from Sister Marie Angelica looked as if she had a skull for a face. Against whom is she playing, after all? That was illuminating. Here's a seasonal poem about potatoes. You've got to dig them early or they'll freeze and then get soft and then freeze and they'll be no good. So that was going on one year. So this is called the digging. My wife isn't going to like it. She says, you always write about our arguments. Why don't you write about something great? But, unless you have conflict, what's a good story without conflict? So anyway, so I'll have to ask her forgiveness. But it turns out well in the end. The digging. It's that time of year, the hedgerows hung with bittersweet. Potato time. How early the freeze, I'd say, if we were speaking. We are not. We turn our spading forks against the earth. It's stiff. The Reds and Idahos hard as stone, a total loss. Once it was us against the beetles, blight, whatever was not potato. How they flowered, rows and rows in white. Now look, we give it one last try, and there, far down in softer soil, a seam of them, still perfect. One after another, we hold them up to the dying day. Kneel down to sift for more. In the dark of earth, I come upon her hand, she mine. A couple of spuds. And we live, just two more, then we'll schmooze. We live in an old house. Sandy Sergio taught me the other day when she gave an absolutely wonderful presentation as the newly appointed Poet Laureate of Glastonbury, that less might be more. I'm overdoing it anyway, but we live in an old house, 1780, the old part, and up and down the staircase one goes, putting one's hand on the railing and on the newel post, and one wonders who's been there before. We had a Terminex man come once, and he was down on his hands and knees in the cellar with a big white round face like a moon, and I said, what do you think you're going to find? He said, well, I'm finding some interesting things here. There were things that were, had wings and looked like ants, and he said, what else do you have in the house? And I said, the usual ghosts. I saw this white face rise up like a full moon, and he said, are they very active? So it's that kind of a house. So anyway, seriously though, I don't want to be thought of as a funny man. I want to be serious. It's the cross one. This is a serious one. It's called Hands. Descending from the second story, I steady myself, hand sliding on the handrail, then polishing the knob of the newel. Time has worn away its beige, revealing the rose of earlier days and hints of darker shades below. For over 200 years and 12 wars, such a scoring by hands. In the wash of history, time shrinks. I remember placing my palm on the red ochre print of a hand in a Utah cave, surprised by the almost perfect fit. At the newel, I fit my hand to the backs of other hands that touched its round in passing. Hands of lovers ascending, hands of mourners descending, slow hands of the old, quick of the children rushing by. And I feel the hands of those to come, the sad and the joyful, taking their turns, their palms brushing the back of my palm where it rests on the newel. And I thought to myself, you fool, when I read this over, why didn't you work on the pun of, but no, goodness. You know, Samuel Johnson said, find the cleverest, wittiest thing in your poem and cut it out. I won't even tell you what the pun is, because I think you already thought of it. But it's better to have it hiding than to, don't bring it out. Are they very active? On the last poem, on the way, and thank you all for coming out on such a beautiful night, and we'll have a great time talking to one another soon. On the road to the airport on Route 20, if you turn left, there's Mark's Auto Parts, and I went there to get a windshield for an AMC Hornet. If you remember those cars, they always needed something. American Motors disaster, worse than the Edsel. And I didn't get it, but I did get out into the graveyard of old parts without a hard hat and got kicked out, but not before I had my poem. I took it to Mark, and he said, "Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I know about that poem. It had come out in the Atlantic, and somebody had shown it to him." So anyway, it's called Mark's Auto Parts. In come the wrecks to Mark's, and out the gear knobs, gas tanks, radiators, speakers, mufflers, bins of parts. The crummiest clunker is worth Mark's while. There's an alley of front ends, Beetles, Buicks, Jags, a 49 Nash, an avenue of chassis, a park of gutted bodies piled on one another like lovers. Everything has a future, all of which is very gratifying, a sign of what we'll amount to in the aftertime. The loose strife will take this, frogs that. The earth will value our humus. The cardinal put us to use. Dismantled, we'll go far. Thank you all. Go out and do good work and spread the word. That it doesn't hurt. Thanks for tuning in today and listening to some of the poems that I read from my newest book, Going On. If you would like to read some more poems from the book, please visit antrimhousebooks.com, where you can also visit some other books by the press. Once again, I would like to thank Ken Picard, the wonderful producer of this show, and Karen Handville, the equally wonderful station manager at SCTV, and would like to invite you back for the 36th episode of Speaking of Poetry.